everyone! We are the Group 4 students from BN3. For today's video, we are going to talk about performance-based assessment.
After studying this module, you should be able to
Explain the concepts of performance-based assessment and its features.
differentiate the two types of performance-based assessment.
Explain the advantages and limitations of performance-based assessment.
Describe the steps in developing performance-based assessment. Explain what is rubric and its purposes. Give and describe the different kinds of rubrics. In Assessment of Learning 1, we have learned assessment tools for knowledge and skills in cognitive domain. The knowledge and skills being assessed are memorization of concepts, historical events, mathematical procedures, and the like. Other skills such as writing poem or essay in English class, solving mathematical problems, baking cake in TLE classes, conducting experiments in natural sciences must also be learned, which can be appropriately assessed using performance-based assessment. Hogan 2007 pointed out that performance-based assessment, sometimes referred to as authentic assessment or alternative assessment, implies that students need to demonstrate skills by actual performance on a certain task, rather just marking on answer sheet. Authentic assessment means the teacher must use realistic situations in the testing materials. The term alternative assessment that it is alternative to select response testing.
Performance-based education poses a challenge for teachers to design instruction that is task-oriented. Learning needs to be connected for relevant tasks that focus on students' ability to use their knowledge and skills in meaningful ways.
Now, let's proceed to the definition of performance-based assessment. Performance-based assessment is a direct and systematic observation of the actual performance of students based on the predetermined performance criteria. It is assessing the performance of students that represents a set of strategies for the application of knowledge, skills, and work habits through the performance of tasks that are meaningful. According to Braudy, performance-based assessment also provides the teacher the information on how the students understand and apply knowledge, and it allows the teacher to integrate performance assessment in the instructional process to provide additional learning activities. From the definitions, we can say that students are required to perform a task or create an answer or product that will demonstrate mastery of knowledge and skills rather than selecting an answer from a given list of options. Now, let's go on to the features of performance-based assessment. According to Granlund, there are features of performance-based assessment that differ from other types of assessment. They are the following. Number 1. Greater realism of the tasks. This means that the students must apply the romance-based assessment, needs longer time to assess the performance of the student knowledge and skills by demonstrating a task that shows application in a real-world situation. Number 2. Greater complexity of the tasks. The tasks are difficult to understand and analyze because they are less structured problems that encourage the students to perform with originality and thinking skills, and they may have multiple solutions. Number 3. Greater time needed for assessment. Performance-based assessment needs longer time to assess the performance of the students because of difficulty of designing the task, the comprehensive nature of the task, and the increased time needed to evaluate the results. Number 4. Greater use of judgment in scoring. The evaluator should consider the set of judging criteria associated with the performance assessment. Also, the scoring approach must be congruent to the assessment purpose. This must be taken into consideration because of the complexity of the task, originality of the response, and in some cases, the variety of possible solutions that need a greater use of judgment in scoring.
There are two types of performance-based assessment tests, according to Granlund, Lane, and Miller 2009. Number 1. Restricted Response Performance Task. The performance task is highly structured with limited scope. The instructions of the task are more focused and the limitations are always indicated. Examples of restricted response performance tasks are writing a one-page summary of the program, demonstrate how to set up cooking utensils, delivering a 2-minute campaign speech, and constructing a bar graph of scores of 50 students in a quiz in statistics. There are advantages of restricted response performance tasks. A. Easy to relate to a particular learning outcomes or objective. B. The administration is easy and the output is easier to judge or evaluate. C. The performance task is more structured and so requires less time to administer. If there are advantages, there is also disadvantage of restricted response performance tasks. The disadvantage is it prevents the students from demonstrating fully their abilities and skills. Number 2. Extended Response Performance Task. This type of performance task is less structured and broader in scope. Examples of it are by a teacher, students conducting a thesis and then presenting and defending their findings in front of a panel of judges. Next, writing and writing a poem after being criticized. When a teacher uses extended responses performance tasks, she or he can obtain better information about the student's ability to identify the crucial point of the problem, to gather and integrate information for solving it, and to provide original and well-supported information.
Let's proceed to focus of performance-based assessment. Performance-based assessment can assess the student's process, product, or both process and product, depending on the learning's outcome. It also involves doing, instead of just knowing, about an activity or task. The teacher assesses the effectiveness of the process or procedure and the product or output used in carrying the instruction. The problem is when to use the process and the product. So according to Granlund, use the process when, first, there is no product. Second, the process is orderly and directly observable. Third, correct procedures. Steps are crucial to later success. Fourth, analysis in procedural steps can help in improving the product. And fifth, learning is in the early stage. So according to Granlund, use the product when, first, different procedures result in an equal good product. Second, procedures not available for observation. Third, the procedures have been mastered already. And last, products have qualities that can be identified and judged.
There are accomplishments of performance-based assessment and its examples. Under accomplishments, there are 4, namely products, complex cognitive processes, observable performance, and habit of the mind and social skills. Examples of products are poems, essays, graphs, exhibits, drawing, maps, and etc. In complex cognitive processes, there are skills in analyzing, organizing, and using information. In observable performance, examples of it are physical movements such as dance, gymnastics, encoding, oral presentation, focusing microscope in laboratory, following sets of procedures, bisecting angles, following cooking procedures. And the last one is the habit of the mind and social skills. Here are some examples. Mental and behavioral habits such as persistence and cooperation during group work, recognition skills. There are advantages of performance-based assessment. Number 1. It assesses complex learning outcomes not measured by paper and pencil. Number 2. It assesses the process as well as the product. Number 3. It communicates instructional goals that relate to real-world context. Number 4. It assesses the progress as well as the performance. Number 5. It involves the students in the process of assessing their own growth. Number 6. It recognizes that students can express what they know and can do in different ways. Number 7. Specific, direct, and understandable information about the students are available to parents. Number 8. It enhances the professional skills of teachers through collaboration with other teachers. Number 9. It can establish a framework for observing students that is consistent with the principles of child development.
So there are 3 limitations of performance-based assessment. So the number 1 is constructing performance assessment is time-consuming. 2. Scoring is often questionable because it is not reliable, most especially if the scoring rubrics are not properly prepared. 3. It measures only a limited scope of learning objectives.
So, there are 3 steps in developing performance-based assessment. The first one is define the purpose of the assessment. The purpose of the assessment will be considered in making decisions in the subsequent steps of the process. The second one is determine the skills, learning outcomes, and taxonomy level. This is important in determining which learning outcomes requires performance assessment and which one is appropriate for traditional assessment. The last one is design and develop activity or performance task. Before identifying the activity or task, you should consider the time allotted for the activity, the availability of resources, and the data needed to judge the quality of the student's performance. The activity and task should be in line in the development of subject matter or learning instruction. Examples of tasks that the teacher can create may involve debates, solving mathematical problems, experiments in science class, presentation of historical events, job and responsibility.
Scoring rubric. Scoring rubric is a scoring skill used to assess students' performance along a task-specific set of criteria. Authentic assessment typically are criterion reference measures, that is a student's aptitude on a task, is determined by matching the student's performance against a set of criteria to determine the degree to which the student's performance meets the criteria for the task.
There are 2 types of rubric: the analytic rubrics and the holistic rubrics. So, the first one is the analytic rubrics. What is analytic rubrics? Analytic rubric resembles a grid with the criteria for a student product listed in the leftmost column and with levels of performance listed across the top row, often using numbers and or descriptive tags. The cells within the center of the rubric may be left blank or may contain descriptions of what the specified criterion look like for each level of performance. When scoring with an analytic rubric, each of the criteria is scored individually. Analytic rubric articulates levels of performance for each criterion so the teacher can assess student performance on each criterion. So, here's the example of analytic rubric for grading oral presentations. There are advantages and disadvantages of analytic rubric. So first, the advantages of analytic rubric provide useful feedback on areas of strength and weakness. criterion can be weighted to reflect the relative importance of each dimension, while the disadvantages of analytic rubric takes more time to create and use than a holistic rubric. Unless each point for each criterion is well-defined, raters may not arrive at the same score.
The second type of rubric, the holistic rubric. So what is holistic rubric? A holistic rubric consists of a single scale with all criteria to be included in the evaluation being considered together. Example, clarity, organization, and mechanics. With a holistic rubric, the rater assigns a single score, usually on a 1 to 4 or 1 to 6 point scale. Based on an overall judgment of the student work, the rater matches an entire piece of student work to a single description on the scale.
Example of holistic rubric: articulating thoughts through written communication, final paper, or project. 4. Above average. The audience is able to easily identify the focus of the work and is engaged by its clear focus and relevant details. Information is presented logically and naturally. There are no more than 2 mechanical errors or misspelled words to distract the reader. 3. Sufficient. The audience is easily able to identify the focus of the student work, which is supported by relevant ideas and supporting details. Information is presented in a logical manner that is easily followed. There is minimal interruption to the work due to misspellings and or mechanical errors. 2. Developing. The audience can identify the central purpose of the student work without little difficulty, and supporting ideas are present and clear. The information is presented in an orderly fashion that can be followed with little difficulty. There are some misspellings and or mechanical errors, but they do not seriously distract from the work. 1. Needs improvement. The audience cannot clearly or easily identify the central ideas or purpose of the student work. Information is presented in a disorganized fashion, causing the audience to have difficulty following the author's ideas. There are many misspellings and or mechanical errors that negatively affect the audience's ability to read the work.
Advantages of holistic rubrics. Emphasis on what the learner is able to demonstrate rather than what she cannot do. Saves time by minimizing the number of decisions internally. Can be applied consistently by trained raters, increasing reliability. While the disadvantages of holistic rubric does not provide specific feedback for improvement. The student work is at varying levels, spanning the criteria points. It can be difficult to select the single best description. Criteria cannot be weighted.
Other kinds of rubrics. Number 1. Developmental rubric. While other types of rubrics measure assignment or project, a developmental rubric tracks a student's overall progress toward proficiency. This continuum rubrics can span one standard, one subject, or one skill. Developmental rubrics are more time-consuming for teachers than analytic rubrics, but they are the most informative type of assessment tool.
Here is the example of developmental rubric. Grading rubric for participation in discussion forums, 10 points total. Discussion forums are worth 30% of course grade. Unlike the other rubrics, developmental rubrics indicate an ongoing learning process. They measure skill rather than participation and effort levels. Students will ideally start at the progressing level at the beginning of the unit or school year and will end at the proficient level.
Rubrics as checklist. These basic rubric examples ensure that all types of assignments are present. They help students keep track of each element of a project Checklists also let teachers see whether a student fully accomplished an assignment or task, but they aren't as informative as other rubrics. Checklists are a distinct type of rubric, where there are only two performance levels possible. Checklists tend to be longer than other types of rubrics, since each aspect of performance you are looking for in students. Work performances essentially becomes its own criterion. When you are using a checklist, every decision is binary. For example, yes or no, present or absent, passed or failed, and etc. Most rubrics can be converted rather directly into a checklist. For example, here is a rubric for grading journal entries.
Levels of performance in rubrics. Okay, there is no specific number of levels of rubrics now. It will vary depending on the task and your needs. A rubric can have a few as 2 levels or as many as you decide is appropriate. Generally, it is better to start with a smaller number of levels of performance and then expand if necessary. Making distinction in a student performance across 2 or 3 broad categories is difficult. As the number of levels increases, judgment becomes finer and finer.